piper. That's our hell. It's an Irish bar where it's St. Patrick's Day every day, forever. Mikey Palmisi and Brendan Fallone were there too. They were friends.
Those two guys hated each other.
Listen, you gotta relax, okay? You just need some rest.
They're friends now. They were playing dice with 2 Roman soldiers and a bunch of the Irish guys.
Doesn't make sense.
And the Irish, they were winning every roll.
To me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All you gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else in the leprechaun say yeah? I wanna know where to go. I wanna know where to go. Give me the go. I wanna know where to go. I wanna know where to go. Give me the go. I wanna know where to go. I wanna know where to go. Give me the go. I wanna know where to go. I wanna know where to go. Give me the go. I want to go. I want to go. I want to go.
All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to Dixieland the Proletariat. We're going to talk about Southern working class history and current events through a leftist perspective. Make sure to like us on social media at Dixieland the Proletariat or Dixie Prole. And if you want to give your wages to a bunch of rednecks, then subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/DixieProle. We've got a lot of cool stuff to give you, including CDs, stickers, a cookbook, Discord server, Twitch stream, and exclusive episodes. We also have a Spotify playlist with some great artists you also check out, as well as our merch store. This podcast is brought to you by Contractional Monogamy, Therapy, Vaping, Living at Home, Modelo, Pushing People in Swamps, Tommy Cheating Death, and Arlene Foster, formerly of the DUP. Shout out to our new Patreon subscriber, Kenneth. Our monthly Patreon surplus goes out to groups that are run by and/or help marginalized people directly. As always, I'm Nelson with...
Hey, I'm fucking Mickey Macaroni over here.
Hello there. It's me.
Jesus.
Coming to you straight from Dublin.
We get one person on who's on the same side of the fucking ocean as I am, and y'all start with this shit.
Florida's on the other side of the ocean.
It's Monday, isn't it?
God damn.
Yeah. Kai, you're still here?
I am threatening every day that I'm leaving.
And our guest this evening is...
So, Craicelf. My name's Craicelf, and I'm originally from South Carolina. I moved over to Ireland over 3 years ago, and I'm a member of the Workers' Party of Ireland. I'm just speaking here today as myself, but yeah, I'll definitely offer a perspective as a member of the Workers' Party of Ireland, which is a socialist political party here across the 32 counties of Ireland.
I told Kai that your family was in South Carolina, then you moved back to Ireland. She got really happy because she's like, finally, someone did the right thing and left and moved back to Europe.
I did.
I'm only half white, and I exiled myself over here.
I'm waiting on my 23andMe to figure out where I should go.
Yeah, the Great Migration.
I came over to the UK to claim the UK for the Mohawk Nation. So we're doing a reverse colonialism.
Just going to go back to the cradle of civilization.
Yeah.
Just find a cave somewhere in Central Africa.
I'm going back to the Caucasus Mountains.
Wait. Are you saying Caucasians are the most civilized? Or what are you trying to say here?
Tyler.
Oh, hey.
Whoa. Macaroni allegory over here.
Yeah, hey. Tommy Stromboli.
And Tommy's like, I'm staying right here. Fuck all y'all.
I can't go anywhere. They don't want me over there. They don't want me over here.
I'm just waiting for the day that you guys come over to visit me and you never leave.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah,
no, we're both getting stabbed. That's what's gonna happen.
No, Tommy's becoming
oh yeah, UK drill rapper. We're gonna explain to everyone that Tommy's a drill rapper.
I'm just gonna get over there and see everyone else's shitty teeth and be like, I'm fucking home.
Tommy, do you have a new animal today?
No new animals.
Did you kill the cat?
You still got the cat, right?
Kill is such a strong word.
Did you late term abortion the cat?
Hey, sorry.
Craicelf has no. Okay, so we had an episode yesterday with an OBGYN in Alabama that does abortion access and healthcare, and Tommy's cat was just like meowing like crazy. And so that's when the late term abortion joke came in. So it's not
right.
not just like over here, just like killing cats like that. No. Tommy's cat was really cute. I miss Black
I only
Phillip,
kill
though.
cats off camera. So.
Yeah. I would have to protest as we're a 3-cat household, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Tommy. I miss Black Phillip though. The bunny was the best.
Black Phillip was dope, but
Yeah.
I had to give him back.
Just real quick, Tommy, your microphone is a little low.
Oh yeah, it's turned up a bit.
Sorry, is that better?
Oh, much
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Now we can
Velvet.
hear your
Cool.
sexy velvet voice.
Oh yeah.
So can we let our guests speak yet?
Yeah, we can
Are we
let our
done with
guests-
Are we done with the clusterfuck?
We are no the whole podcast a clusterfuck. I'm surprised it's still going.
Yeah, no one's gonna watch this and listen to this. Yeah.
People are gonna be like, "What the hell does Ireland have to do in the South?" But that's why Craicelf is here, because it's like Kai was our first Southerner abroad, so you're like technically our second Southerner abroad. So
Right.
tell us about the Workers' Party of Ireland, because like in America, we don't have really a left-wing party, as we all know, with the Democrats and yeah. So what's it like? What's it like being able to be part of an actual socialist party?
Yeah, and then like I would say too, like when I first moved here over 3 years ago, like just what you just described, I wasn't used to maybe the plethora of left-wing parties to have options from. Like when I first moved to Belfast, I was written in West Belfast, and you had several socialist parties, you know, among them People Before Profit, Workers' Party of Ireland, Irish Republican Socialist Party. You've got IRG, Lasser Yarig, Communist Party of Ireland. You've also now got the Connolly Youth Movement. I mean, like, and it's the Socialist Party of Northern Ireland. Like, I'm just going on and on and on. There's so many different left-wing parties in Ireland. It was it took a while to really decide what party I wanted to join. So the Workers' Party of Ireland, to give you just a very brief history, if you're familiar with the party Sinn Féin, of course, a lot of people know Sinn Féin as the major Republican Party in Ireland. Well, Sinn Féin actually split from the Workers' Party. At that time was known as official Sinn Féin in 1969, 1970. And the party split in two different directions. So you had official Sinn Féin and you had provisional Sinn Féin. Provisional Sinn Féin went on to become the Sinn Féin that you know today, which is the largest party in Ireland, which is basically like a social democrat Irish Republican Party, whereas the official Sinn Féin was a Marxist-Leninist, basically Irish Republican, secular socialist party, and took a very anti-sectarian line on things. And at that time, you also had a split in the IRA as well, with the provisional IRA and the official IRA as well, corresponding there. So the official Sinn Féin went on to have basically to later become Sinn Féin, the Workers' Party. And then later on in the history, Sinn Féin was just dropped and it just became the Workers' Party. Now the official IRA had an armed campaign against the British state from 1969, and then they carried on for 3 years, and basically started to realize at that time what was escalating as this conflict we now know as the Troubles had become a sectarian conflict. This is like, it had basically divided the working class purely among Catholic nationalist lines and Protestant unionist lines, and at that time the official IRA decided that this wasn't really a conflict that they were interested in continuing, so they declared a ceasefire. And as a part of that ceasefire, the party suffered another split with the Irish Republican Socialist Party splitting from them, who wanted to continue the conflict, and that they ended up becoming the IRSP, and then the INLA split from the official IRA. But then at that time, the party pursued completely peaceful means, basically, maybe with some exceptions, but from that point on, and then that takes us into the 80s. The party had a lot of electoral successes in the south of Ireland, and at that time, the 90s, there was another split from the party as well, the Democratic left, where a bunch of social democrats left the party. That would have been a time where the party had a very close relationship with the Soviet Union. and in the end, that takes us up to basically the 90s and then the 2000s, where we're at, or 2020. So the Workers' Party of Ireland. That just gives you a brief history, very brief history of our party, and where it came from. So
it sounds like it's like every left-wing movement, it just kept splitting and splitting and dividing and dividing and splitting and splitting.
That old joke about the parties in Ireland is about how they split and how it's just become this inculcated thing that every time there's this ideological split, there's a new name that you have to learn, and you better get the fuck right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And it is very. If you talk to people over here too, like these splits families. Like there's families where maybe one sibling was in a provisional Sinn Féin, one sibling was an official Sinn Féin. And some of these splits they go back, generations, and a lot of deep history of some people, on these things. But
with those splits and divides, is there any so you see kind of in other countries like a united front, or like a left-wing bloc? Is there any working to? I've heard of the Connolly movement in the youth, and it was a Pros or Roundtables episode with I think they had some members on. But is there any working together amongst these parties, or is it still bitterly divided?
Yeah, so at the moment, I wouldn't say that there's an official a relationship, And I mean, personally for me, I think that's something that we really need to start looking into. You know what I mean? Because obviously the capitalists, have one aligned interest, and to me personally, it does break my heart to see so many different divisions in the left. I mean, not only just in the left, but also within Marxism, Leninism. I mean, I can name you 4 different Marxist-Leninist organizations right now in Belfast. And so we're it's split all over the place, but is there an official relationship? No, but what I will say is that when you go out to these protest actions, and when you start whether it's, for instance, the recent Palestine protests, or before that when it was de-escalating sectarian tensions along the peace line here in Belfast, when you go out there, you're going to see the other parties, and the parties will work together in that kind of protest sense, within the specific scopes of whatever actions are being taken, so I've seen that happen several times,
Yeah, it's glad folks are working together for a common cause. And I do have another question. So you're in Belfast. So does the party, I guess, transcend Northern Ireland and the Republic, or is it just in one, or how does that work with the border and with the two different governments?
Yeah, definitely. So a Workers' Party of Ireland, like almost every Irish Republican Party, is going to be a national, which we would consider 32 county, all Ireland party. So yes, we would contest elections here in the north. The Stormont Executive, which is basically kind of think of it as a parliament for the north of Ireland, and then you have obviously the Dáil Éireann, which is the legislature for the south of Ireland. So we would contest elections in there as well. Of course, as long with the local elections all across Ireland, wherever our branches are held. So and I'll give you a great example. Just here this past this past Sunday, I was down in Bodenstown for the national commemoration, and that would have been the national party coming from Belfast, Dublin, Cork, coming all down to Bodenstown to celebrate or remember the life and death of the Wolf Tone, if you're familiar with Wolf Tone. So
that actually. So that actually brings me to my next question. Within the party, do you have that Catholic Protestant divide? Because Wolfe Tone was, as I recall, was a Protestant minister who started the first United Irishmen, but then eventually the Catholic Church and the Catholic wing becomes the more dominant wing of Irish nationalism. So within the party, do you have that split, especially in the North, amongst the Catholic and Protestant members, or is that not a thing?
Okay, yeah, that's a really, really, really great question. The Workers' Party is one of the main things that the party really fights for is anti-sectarianism. And what you just described there is a sectarian divide between the Catholic Irish people and the Protestant Irish people. And obviously, traditionally today, and especially today in the North, the majority of people with Protestant background would probably be a unionist political opinion, and so the Protestant working class would be mostly in line maybe to unionism or loyalism. Loyalism is maybe more extreme unionism, and that's loyalism to the British Crown. However, our party has always been anti-sectarian. We've always been for the working class of both. And that's exactly in the tradition of Wolfe Tone, who, as you mentioned there, Wolfe Tone was a Protestant. He was a Presbyterian who united for the first time Catholic and Protestant working class together in a fight against the British Empire for an independent United Ireland. And we see Wolfe Tone, of course, as the father of Irish republicanism. And and that's really where we stand in that anti-sectarian lines. That's the number one thing that I think our party holds dear is, so we have Protestant members, we have Catholic members, and we wouldn't see a sectarian divide in our party or allow such a divide. It's just for the Irish working class, really, so.
I don't really know much about.
I just real quick, I want to disambiguate some things as a remedial step, because I know that there are a lot of people, like especially back in the States, who are unclear that there is a difference between Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland is still part of the UK, which is British, and all these things. So if you wouldn't mind just covering just like a real quick rundown for people who don't know that yet. Yeah,
that's a great point. Because sometimes when you're living here in the trenches, and you get so deep into it, yeah, right?
As smooth as Nelson is acting now, he had told me several times that you're in the North. No, wait, you're in the Republic. No, you're in the North. You're in the Republic. So I'm gonna call him out right now. But I mean, most people just don't know if they're back in the States. So right. It's not that big a deal. But I want people to understand that first.
As someone who came from a very Catholic family, I forget that other people are not aware of like what went on. So like, yeah, sorry, my bad. All the listeners, 26 + 6 = 1. But
so really, like my best thing you could do is pull up Google Maps on your phone right now. Look at Ireland. You're going to see two different states. You're going to see a divided country, a partitioned country, as we would call it, and that all goes back. When Ireland was forming as its current situation today, it started with the 1916 Rising. The 1916 Rising was where the first Irish Republic was put forth. The men of the 1916 Rising basically took hold of the GPO down in Dublin, and it ended up losing. But the uprising sparked and inspired a generation of Irish rebels for the Irish War of Independence. So connect this kind of like, any kind of war of independence, Ireland had their own. And basically at that time, they would have been called the IRA, fought a war against, which we call the old IRA, really, fought a war against the British military. At that time, all of Ireland was part of the UK. Like all of Ireland was a part of the UK. The war was fought. And at that time, there was what's called the Anglo-Irish Treaty. And that was very controversial. And basically what it did was it split Ireland in half. Because up in the north, there was a lot of business interests that were aligned to maintaining links with the United Kingdom, and a lot of those people who owned those businesses were of a Protestant background, and the majority of the Protestant people supported a union with the British government. That's called they signed the Ulster Covenant and everything else, and Northern Ireland at that time was partitioned into two different Irelands. Then in the south, you had the Irish Free State, and that was basically home rules essentially agreed. At that time, the Free State would still remain under the British Crown, but would still be an independent place, kind of like Canada at that time. And then that was a very controversial decision. And then this is where it kind of gets a bit weird. Hang on to me here. That's where half the IRA was okay with that plan, and half the IRA hated that plan because it divided our country, et cetera, et cetera. So you had the anti-treaty, IRA, and then you had the pro-treaty government forces. And they fought each other in the Civil War right after the War for Independence. Eventually, the pro-treaty side essentially kind of won, and then De Valera, who was leading the anti-treaty forces, left, and then came back and created his own political party, Fianna Fáil, and then that kind of created your modern Ireland, which later went on to become the Irish Republic, which is its own independent country, 26 counties of the south of Ireland. And in the north, that left you with 6 counties of Ireland that are still under British occupation or still under British control, however you want to look at it. And we would call that Northern Ireland or the North of Ireland, depending on what you want to call it. And so then that's still,
Can't forget that it's still a colonized state, basically.
yeah, it's definitely still under British, rule for sure. But I mean, if you came to Ireland today, it's an open border. You can cross from one side to the other, and other than the money changing and the signs changing, like you wouldn't.
I've done that drive.
Yeah, very good, very good.
I did that drive on a big rugby day, and the motorway was just packed. And I just remember seeing streams of rugby fans coming out of their buses and peeing in the median. That is my impression of Ireland, and it felt like home.
Yeah. Rugby is a great example where the Irish rugby team is a United Ireland rugby team, so it covers both North and South. So
I didn't know that.
I noticed you've shown up in. I'm assuming that's a national football shirt that you're wearing. Yes, national team football shirt.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, we're inviting the guy who's Irish on. Let me put on the most Irish thing I own.
I was actually just sleeping in this. I woke up for 2 a.m. to get on the thing, but yeah.
Honestly, let me just commend you as somebody who is also on this side of the Atlantic for staying up this fucking late for these guys. I sat here for 2 hours trying to waste time by reading a ghost story, and at least you got some sleep.
I know.
Tyler, you had what you had to say? You had a question?
That answered my question. So Ireland's just like Virginia, what it seems like.
Yeah, well, in the sense that Virginia was divided up, turned into two different things. Yeah, kind of similar. It'd be more like if West Virginia was still run by the British government, though. Be a bit more like that.
Man, I'd like to see that.
No, you wouldn't.
No.
I promise. No, you wouldn't.
But yeah, my original question was going to be what's the appeal of people being loyal to the crown? But you answered that with the business and the capital.
Yeah, I think that was kind of that's at that time that would have been the big thing. Nowadays, several generations on, there's a very strong unionist community here in Belfast. And after the Good Friday Agreement, basically, it's a situation where if you're born here, you get to decide whether you want to be British or Irish or both, or everyone here is entitled to dual citizenship. They're entitled to Irish citizenship or British citizenship. And I would say, I wouldn't want to necessarily put words in anyone's mouth, but I would say the general idea is that the unionists, they feel very British, in the same way that a Welsh person might feel British, or maybe a unionist Scottish person might feel British. They feel very British, and that's that gender going back way generations and stuff like that. These people have always been very loyal to the British crown.
Yeah, I'm sure that, excuse me, you can, Craicelf can elaborate on this, but from my understanding, quite a lot of Ireland was forcefully colonized by essentially the English by using the Scottish, who were then part of Britain, because Scotland wasn't always part of Britain. Once it became part of Britain, they forcefully used the Scottish to go over to Ireland. That's how you end up with a lot of Scots-Irish people. But it was like a forceful colonization by proxy. Yeah. And that cemented a lot of what he was saying, these business interests and this long seated colonization, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that would be called, so that's called the Ulster Plantation. If anyone wants to look that up, that's exactly what it's called, the Ulster Plantation. And yeah.
It just sounds racist.
Yeah. It wasn't good. It wasn't.
I think anything with plantation in it just is bad automatically.
Yeah, exactly.
So I got a question. For really both you and Kai, since it affects both of y'all. But how is Brexit affected the border? How has Brexit affected both the Republic and the North and the UK? So where does that fit in? I know it's been crazy. There's talks of a hard border. There's talks between whatever's left of the UVF and the IRA, restarting the troubles. And then you have a shit with like maritime law, like all this shit going on. So like, what's the deal? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Basically, I think the number one thing right now with Brexit when it comes to this part of the world is what we would call the Northern Ireland Protocol. Okay. Now, obviously, with the UK leaving the European Union, with it goes your open borders. So the question was always, when it came to Brexit in Ireland, where was the hard border going to fall? Was it going to fall along partition? Was it going to fall right across the island of Ireland and have like hard border checks crossing from Northern Ireland to the south of Ireland? Or would the hard border fall in the IRC, where you actually would have hard border checks from Northern Ireland to the rest of the UK? And that's exactly where it is now. It's called the IRC border by loyalists. And essentially what it is Northern Ireland, while yes, Northern Ireland is outside of the European Union, we still follow almost all of the food regulating laws and all the import laws and all these other things of the European Union here, whereas the rest of the UK and Britain doesn't. And so that's the purpose of that, is basically so that we can trade freely with the south of Ireland and the rest of the European Union without customs checks, without anyone checking anything like that. And whereas if we ship stuff to Britain and vice versa, there's the potential there for customs checks depending on where the stuff's going. So there actually are hard border checks between Northern Ireland and Britain. And that may sound really boring. Maybe you're like, oh, customs checks, what, who cares? Well, for people who consider themselves extremely British, who are very loyal to the UK, basically what you've said is like, well, you're not really as fully British as someone in Scotland or Wales. And so these people feel like they're very under threat. They feel that unionism is very under threat. They feel that basically it's an economic united Ireland, essentially. And these people are very, 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 very angry. I think the PSNI, last time they checked, there's about, I want to say roughly 21,000 members of the Ulster Volunteer Force and the Ulster Defence Army, the UDA, the UVF in Northern Ireland today. That's 21,000 people. That's more people than are in the actual Irish military, the actual official Southern Irish military. These are the organizations that signed up to the peace agreement, the Good Friday Agreement that ended the Troubles, and they have via the Loyalist Community Council, which kind of is their spokesperson, they have withdrawn support from the peace agreement that brought an end to the Troubles. And they veiled threats. They've issued, they basically have issued veiled threats of violence. Just a few months ago, when I actually reached out to you at first, we had a lot of violence and riots starting to pop off all across Belfast. When I was on the way home from work, there was actually some young men linked to these paramilitaries actually hijacked a bus and set the bus on fire right in the middle of Shankill Road, along with other riots and stuff like that. And the smoke, you could see the smoke coming up in the sky and everything like this. I mean, we had riots in like 5, 6, 7, 8 different parts of the city. We've seen ethnic cleansing in Carrickfergus with UVF intimidating Catholic families out of their homes in Carrickfergus. We have seen an escalation in those sectarian things. And that was one of the things I mentioned earlier, was our party was down on the peace line, de-escalating on the Republican side, on the Catholic side of the peace wall, to try to keep our youth in that area of Belfast to keep them from rioting and joining the fight. Because essentially in Belfast you have peace walls, right, running through neighborhoods, dividing the unionist neighborhoods and nationalist Republican neighborhoods, you know what I mean? And so that you even saw these riots starting to, spill over the peace wall. And that was something I think was rare for me, was seeing, you actually saw both sides of the community rioting it against each other at one point, with one of the worst parts of those riots here recently. So that's kind of the impact. Thankfully, the riots have kind of fizzled out. Now we're coming up on a major holiday here in this country called the 12th of July. And that's always where you see the heightened tensions year after year. That's probably one of the most heightened tensions day of the whole year. And so what I think some people are worried about, we're worried about maybe the 12th might get a little aggressive, where we don't know for sure. But yeah, I mean, with these veiled threats continually coming from loyalists, they're basically saying, listen, you're gonna stop that sea border, and we're gonna try peacefully first. But if you don't stop this sea border, eventually there'll be violence. So that's the kind of situation we're in right now.
What's the 12th of July?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So the 12th of July is what Unionists and Loyalists here would celebrate, called the anniversary of the Battle of the Boyne. That goes way back to 1690, believe it or not, way back in 1690. Essentially what it was a war between two English kings. One king, they were both claiming the crown of England, and one was Catholic, one was Protestant. Protestant William of Orange had his army in Ireland at that time, and King James had a Catholic army in Ireland at that time. They fought a battle at the Battle of Boyne. The Protestant king William of Orange won, and that was essentially a major event, a major victory for Protestantism in Ireland. And ever since, that holiday has been celebrated in predominantly the north of Ireland, where they build these massive bonfires, like 10, 12 story bonfires, these huge bonfires all around the city. I mean, sometimes you'll have bonfires like collapsing on houses and burning down entire housing blocks and stuff like this. I mean, these are very large bonfires. You'll have a marching season where the Orange Order, which is a Protestant organization or Protestant loyalist organization, you'll have them marching through areas of the city. Sometimes they'll try to march through Catholic areas, and that can create riots in itself. But basically what it is, it's a celebration of this Protestant victory. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, it becomes a very sectarian event where they'll take like Irish flags and they'll burn them on the bonfire, or they'll burn other signs of Irishness, or Irish politicians, or they'll put these up. They'll put the Pope up on the bonfire. They'll put they put all, and they've even put racial slurs and things like this on bonfires and stuff like this. Because it's a very kind of like right wing kind of ideology, loyalism. But yeah, that's my best synopsis of what the 12th of July is.
So I got to learn about that just as a little side story. My husband and I, fairly soon after we got married, in 2010, decided to go to Northern Ireland to pick up a car that we were buying. And we decided to stay in quite a nice hotel that's in the middle of Belfast. And we were checking in. We're like, why is it so quiet? And the person at the check-in desk was saying, oh, you're here on like the most likely day for shit to go down, basically, because we were there on that day. And when we realized this, we turned around, and across the street from this hotel was an old bombed out pub that had just never been rebuilt. Oh, so that was my introduction to that, and how kind of, for me as somebody who is quite new to living over here, how surreal it was to be like so close to something that in my head was kind of history, that troubles and sectarian violence and all that were history in my head, not something that you could literally see the scars of and was likely to could restart on the night that you're in town. But yeah, other than that, when it comes to Brexit from the UK side, I live in how should I say this? The villain. I live in the UK. They are the villain. And plainly said, nobody, I would hazard to say 99.9% of the people voting on this side of the Irish Sea cared a single fuck about what happened in Northern Ireland when they were voting. So that's the only answer that I can give. They did not care when they were voting. So that's it.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see that clear as day when politicians or you see the interviews of voters and things talk. Yeah, and people here know that, and I think that's especially damaging to unionists sometimes as well, because continually, I mean, what you basically saw was the Boris Johnson had allied himself with the main loyalist party I mentioned here at the beginning of the stream, DUP, Arlene Foster, et cetera, et cetera. They were basically partnered up. They had a coalition in Westminster, and they kind of had an agreement that there wasn't going to be a border in the Irish Sea. And Boris Johnson kind of was basically lying to everybody, and then sure enough, hey, there's a border in the sea. And so basically the the loyalists here saw it as a big betrayal from the Tories, from the Conservative Party and Britain. And yeah, and I mean, it's, but at the same time, it's one of these things where these people loyalists, what kind of surprised me a bit is loyalists don't hinge their loyalism on the English, believe it or not. In fact, a lot of times loyalists will have frustrations with English and stuff like that, but they would see their loyalty not to England, but they would see their loyalty as Irish, or as Ulstermen, as it might say, to the British Crown directly. You know what I mean? So that's, yeah, I mean, but they would definitely see it as a big betrayal. They in fact, you would see it spray painted around loyalist areas here, the betrayal act. You know, so
yeah, there's something so sad coming from another group of colonized people who have pockets in our own communities who are loyal to your oppressors, to your colonizers, and then kind of every time getting tripped up by realizing that they're only as useful to their oppressors, to their colonizers, as their loyalty is the only thing that's useful about them. And as soon as they are no longer useful, all the promises that somebody like Boris Johnson or any of the other prime ministers, any of the other crowned heads that have passed through, they don't care. They want your loyalty for as long as it's useful to them, and then they'll fuck you over as soon because you know, oh, it's just a backwater across the sea. You know, it doesn't they have the same ideas about Wales and about Scotland, and look at where we are now.
yeah, definitely.
So I have a question pertaining to the party. I guess what you were describing is like when loyalist rioting and things and tensions really heating up, right? And since the party is non-sectarian, you have both Catholic and Protestant members of the working class. How does, I guess, the history of the brutality and the violence, because we're all old enough to kind of maybe remember like the tail end of the Troubles, like what officially the Good Friday was like 1998. So like we kind of like, it's still history, but we were kind of alive for that. So like, but it really, you see it in like the late 70s and the 80s that Thatcher exacerbates everything. So like, how does that history of just violence and sectarianism like hurt, I guess, like recruiting maybe? Like, do you have a time where like you go to members of the working class, be like, hey, blah, blah, interests, et cetera, but then they're like, well, are you Catholic or Protestant? And if you say like the wrong thing, they'll be like, no. Like how does that history of the Troubles and the violence hurt recruiting? But also, do people see y'all as like kind of like, because it seems like y'all are neutral, is like trying to keep the peace and trying to be like, hey, we're the working class, which I think it's from what you're saying, like is the right way. Is like it's just a way to divide the working class between the Protestants and the Catholics. But because there's such a deep-seated hatred and history there, are y'all seen as like kind of like teeting on the fence, and you won't choose a side, so no one wants to deal with y'all? Like, how does that work with the party, as much as you can tell us?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just again, speaking as an individual, of course, but my perception would be so to give context here in Belfast, you have mixed areas. The mixed areas may have both Catholic and Protestant people living in, typically are your more middle class, upper middle class type of areas. Working class areas almost exclusively are segregated. Like in the neighborhood I live in, it's almost all Catholics, and everyone here would be like an Irish nationalist in some way. You know, people believing that in a united Ireland. Whereas if I walk 4 streets over, there's a big giant peace wall, and then on the other side of that peace wall is people who are loyalist and unionist and from a Protestant background. And if you move into one of those areas, into one of the loyalist areas, and you're from a Catholic background, or you're from a nationalist Republican background, and people find out about that, there have been several instances where people will throw a brick through your window and drive you out of the neighborhood. Like they will, and I work in a community work with a guy, he's about our age. He was driven out of an area by loyalist paramilitaries. Like he was intimidated out of an area. I mean, so you still have people, of course, living here, the entire country, like everyone here, obviously lived through the Troubles. So I think that's what you're asking about. The sheer amount PTSD and trauma that so many people have faced is something incredible. In fact, I think there's actually, I think there's a statistic where more people have actually died from PTSD related suicide after the Troubles than actually died during the Troubles itself. So many people have seen and been a part of so many different terrible things. I mean, you have people living, like for instance here where I live. I'm not going to be too specific where I live, but basically the area I live in, the people on the other side of that wall at one time came over here and burned down entire streets within living memory. This is like the early 1970s. You know what I mean? So those people are still living here. Those people are still living over there. You know, we also had in 2001 there was the whole Holy Cross girls' school controversy, basically where Catholic schoolgirls had to walk across into a Protestant area to go to their Catholic school, because after the ethnic cleansings and everything happened, the Catholic girls' school was left on the Protestant side. So these Catholic schoolgirls had to walk over to the other side. And this is in 2001. This is 3 years after the peace agreement. They basically had the loyalists had created this conspiracy where the Catholic schoolgirls were being used as IRA spies or some crazy crap. And so you had all these adults throwing like balloons filled with urine and bombs and rocks and all this stuff at these Catholic schoolgirls, and the British Army actually had to escort these schoolgirls to school. And so like those schoolgirls today are, you know, roughly about our age today, you know, and so, you know, you have those people living in this area as well that kind of remember these things. That being said, sectarianism is moving in the right direction. There are a lot of people who are talking more and more on the other side, you know what I mean, especially with the younger people. People are meeting up more and more, you know what I mean? So it's not like, you know, a lot of people have friends and stuff like that across the lines and stuff like that. It's I don't want to paint this picture that everyone is viciously living along the sectarian divide. But when we look at the working class here in Belfast, in the north, sectarianism still is a major issue. Just a couple of weeks ago, a couple of young Protestant children were attacked by Catholic teenagers just up at the top of my street there, you know, and the Catholic community has very much opposed and condemned the actions of those teenagers and is working with, you know, authorities to make sure that they get justice. But that just gives you an idea that we do have sectarian attacks happening regularly across the city. You know, we have people attacking each other because they're from a different background. And I think when it comes to organizing, when it comes to labor organizing, when it comes to the socialist aspect of this is a very detrimental thing. You know, we like everyone's working alongside each other. No workplace is just Catholic or just Protestant anymore. You know what I mean? So when it comes to, you know, union organizing and this stuff, maybe there's more cross community victories and stuff like that. But to answer your question, how our party is viewed, like you said, you were trying to do both. My personal perception is that over the history, the Workers' Party has stuck to a very anti-sectarian message. And at times there have been feuds between the Workers' Party and other Republican parties. Like, for instance, the Provisionals and the Officials had feuds where members of both organizations were killed by members of the other organization. You had feuds between the IRSP, the INLA, basically carrying out murders against Workers' Party members as well. You know, and these feuds have also generated bad blood between people. So, you know, people's families, maybe they come from an IRSP background, maybe they come from a Workers' Party background, you know, and you'll still kind of come up against these old things. I would say it's one of the more disappointing things for me, although it's completely understandable, that the past still weighs so heavily, I think, in politics today. As much as you want to move on and move forward and stuff like that, the history, you know, of the different groups, it still lingers. And I think some of the critics of the Workers' Party might say that we have turned our back on republicanism, that we've turned our back on, you know, Irish republicanism and stuff like that, and we've reached too far in to try to reach out to working class unionists too much. And I would say that's just not true. We are a very Republican Party. I think we would like to maybe see better success in the future in working class unionist areas. But and then there's the same thing on the other side. Workers' Party members have also been shot and killed in the past by loyalists, by both sides. I mean, one of our late founders, Sean Garland, who was a high-ranking member in the party. He basically put it this way: Workers' Party members have been killed by everybody in the conflict. The British military, the RUC, the Republican, the other Republican groups, the loyalist groups. I mean, the Workers' Party caught it from everybody during the conflict. So, yeah, I think I've said enough on that. But
yeah, y'all like hate it all around. It seems like it's like there's no love for the Workers' Party. Oh man, what So I guess I don't mean to. If anyone else has any questions, please chime in. But I got one more off the top of my head that I wanted to ask. What do you personally think the future is? It seems like the youth seems to be more. From what I'm hearing, it seems like less sectarian. But like, what do you think the future of a united Ireland is? Do you think the Good Friday Agreement will go? Oh, so for people who don't know, like, you can explain it better. But when I say, like, do you think the Good Friday Agreement will ever be triggered? Like, do you think that there will ever be a united Ireland? And where would the party stand, I guess, if the 6 counties in the north would have joined the Republic?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So our party, we are an Irish Republican Party, and we believe in a 32-county socialist Irish Republic, and that the socialist part is, of course, very important to us. But the 32-county bit is also very important to us. Our party's history within the last maybe couple of decades is we are opposed to a border poll, in the sense that we think that the border poll at this moment in time, because some certain sectarian contradictions haven't necessarily been resolved fully, that it's basically just not strategically the best time. We aren't opposed to a border poll in practice. We're just opposed strategically to one right now because we don't think that we're going to necessarily win the border poll. Whereas other parties would be very much pro border poll. They're very confident that we can win a border poll. If there's a border poll enacted, if a border poll, and this can only be decided, by the way, by the Secretary of, I think it's the Secretary of Northern Ireland, can trigger this event, is where you have the border poll, where people actually go to the polls and vote on a united Ireland. That's the only way that the united Ireland can happen nowadays. If that event happened and there was going to be a border poll, our party would be very much full pro unification. Would be very much for united Ireland, 100%. You can't really have socialism under a British monarchy. I mean, this doesn't work. And I mean, the Irish nation has to be united, basically for socialism to come to this country. So yeah, but that's our view. What do I think is going to happen? I definitely think a border poll is on the future. And I think it's going to happen anytime soon. I want to say in the next 5 years, it's probably not going to happen, but there probably will be very strong buildup towards it. And I think the big concern here is, like, we can see now with the loyalist violence, these guys have a lot of people, they have a lot of guns, they're ready, like you already see what they're ready to do for the Northern Ireland Protocol. We already just talked about that earlier in the stream. Imagine what these guys are going to be willing to do when it comes to United Ireland. You know what I mean? You're going to have the UVF, you're going to have the UDA, they're going to be, back on the streets. And I think that's the major concern for me personally, as someone who's living in an working class interface area, to go back. I mean, or anyone, no one would want to go back to a time where these loyalist paramilitaries are running drive-by shootings and stuff around the city, and things are blowing up, and I mean, no one wants to go back to that. So that's going to be one of the challenges, but at the end of the day, how long can you let this group of essentially they're basically drug dealers basically now at this point? I mean, how long are we going to let these thugs carry the future of this country? So
I have a quick question, because I don't really know. I'm ignorant to this topic. When you say a peace wall, I know that, so I know in kind of like the actual physical walls, like the Berlin Wall, like running through certain neighborhoods, right? Separating, like, it's a physical barrier.
Yeah, it's a very physical barrier. I think it's 16 feet high. And then there's different pieces. Now it's not like there's just two areas in Belfast. It's actually a patchwork, so you'll go from a Catholic area to a Protestant area to a Catholic area, and then, maybe like this Catholic area is surrounded by Protestant areas, so you have different sections of Peace Wall running all around the city, and they're just patchworks. The biggest Peace Wall that most people would think of is the Peace Wall running between the Shankill Road area and the Falls Road area. And that's the longest stretch of Peace Wall. Now, these Peace Walls, they're typically closed at nighttime around like 10, I want to say 9 o'clock. It changes. Like now, see, when there's trouble popping off, those walls will be shut maybe all day. They might be shut earlier. And I mean, it's unreal. It's a really annoying thing because you got to go from one area to the other city. You know what I mean? And like I know for me, I cross these Peace Walls regularly to go to work and things. It can be very annoying if you're on one side and you're trying to get across the other and the thing's closed. But yeah, you can go freely across the lines during the day. And sometimes people will say, oh well, you might run into trouble crossing and stuff like that. Maybe, but I've crossed these walls, 2 or 3 times in the daytime, never had an issue. But that being said, there was that one day I was coming home from work and then the wall was shut and the bus was being burnt. So things can go from 0 to 100 really quick, So
Do you get stopped because of your accent? Because you don't really have an Irish accent. You still sound like an American.
Yeah, I mean
He has an accent. No, he has an accent. I can hear it. I can hear the nose. Okay, American ears can't hear it.
No, I wouldn't have said I would have an accent. But I would say it works to my advantage because if I do get stopped walking across the Peace Wall, I can play the American card, and you're not really, you're like, hey, all right, yeah.
You would put on that thick Southern band. I do declare, I did not know about the wall in your Irish town. I'm from South Carolina.
I heard that there was profanity and bonfires over here.
Now, see, my pure Southern ways do not pertain to this bond. The heat, I do declare, is too much for my fair skin.
That's right. Yeah.
I can tell you the same act works in London. If you don't want somebody to talk to you in London, just really pull out that American accent as hard as you can. And then like, oh, well, she's just some idiot American.
Y'all got some fish and chips. I heard them things was good.
What the hell's up with this goddamn tea?
Y'all got any sweet tea?
This ain't near sweet enough here. It's hot. What the hell?
What darnation? Y'all burning buses and shit. This is crazy. Cletus, get over here. Oh man. Oh shit. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like I learned a lot actually. I want to keep going, but like that the information you've given so far, like as someone who's taken Anglo-Irish classes and have studied like the troubles in the Northern Irish conflict, like I'm learning stuff. I think it's really interesting that there is organizations that try to transcend like the Catholic and Protestant divide. When it comes to that, they're like with the youth, is it still like how do I put this? Do people even still go to church? Is it more like I'm from a Catholic family, even though for me, for example, I'm Catholic by confirmation. Like I haven't been to mass in like 15 years. Like I don't really care. I don't really believe anymore. But like I would still be considered Catholic, even though like I don't believe because my family's Catholic. Is it like that, especially with the youth, or do people still like Opus Dei, like incense and shit?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And for some people, yeah, that's very much they are practicing Catholics or they are practicing Protestants. But for a lot of people, you're 100% right. Like for instance, in this country, if you say I'm an atheist, people ask you, are you a Catholic atheist or are you a Protestant atheist? All right. So that gives you an idea. Like when we say, when they ask you on the census form, if you're Catholic background or Protestant background, they are not expecting you to be even going to church. They are just asking, it is an ethnic identifier, really. At the end of the day, that's basically how it's treated. It's, and That's all I can really say. I mean, they basically, in the same way when you go and you apply for a job, and is it still like this in the South, where when you apply for a job, they ask you your ethnic background or your race and stuff like that for affirmative action and stuff like that. In this country, you get asked if you're Catholic background or Protestant background, and that's to make sure that that workplaces aren't discriminating against one side or the other, because that was a big problem here for a long time. Was discrimination against Catholic workers, and it was hard for Catholics to get a job. It was hard for Catholics. Like Catholics had a hard time getting a vote, to be able to vote. I mean, there was a whole civil rights movement over here for the civil rights of Catholics, because they were so discriminated against leading up to the Troubles. So that gives you a little bit of a background.
I guess when it comes to not only the North but also the Republic, Kai turned me on to Black Irish TikTok, and I turned Tommy on to Black Irish TikTok, and so like that led down a rabbit hole of like not just like prejudice between Catholic and Protestant, but like there's like also when it comes to like Black Irish or like Irish people who have moved to Ireland from other countries, like there's also that racism. So like I take it the party's stance as a Socialist Party is anti-racist, but do you see that as a problem in not just the North of the Republic or in Ireland as a whole?
Yeah, that is honestly probably the number one issue that really angers me the most, and it's something that we're looking a lot more into these days. Belfast, I think the PSNI I think reports there's about 2 hate crimes every day in the north of Ireland. And there's a lot of hate crimes here, and it is a really, really, really disgusting place. I think just recently a poll was taken from a Black Irish youth. Actually, I think it was just people of color, just in general, non-white Irish youth. What their opinions are. And the majority said that they wanted to leave Belfast because of the attitudes towards race, and it's just a disgusting thing. I would say I would say that racism can be an issue really anywhere in the city, but I would say that it's the most brutal, it's the most despicable in the loyalist areas, in the working class loyalist areas. I mean, these are people who obviously allied themselves with Trump. These are people, I mean, you'll see Confederate flags flying in loyalist areas in Belfast.
Get the fuck out of here.
I swear to God.
Nelson brought this up before, and y'all thought he was joking.
They have fucking in Derry, right? They have fucking murals of Robert E. Lee and the fucking Confederacy. Tommy, we're not going to Northern Ireland. I really want.
Yeah, fuck that.
I wanted to go to
all of that.
I wanted to go to take pictures in front of like IRA murals, but like I'm already gonna get stabbed for being.
I told him no. I invited them over here, and he's like, "No, I want to go over to Northern Ireland so I can see all these murals." And I told him, "Fucking no."
Well, like I would say, that the flip side is on the Republican side. You'll see Republican murals of Frederick Douglass, like for instance on the International Peace Wall, there's a mural of Frederick Douglass. You'll see murals of Nelson Mandela, Fidel Castro, and you'll see there's another mural of Martin Luther King on Beachmount Avenue in West Belfast. You would have seen a lot of solidarity between, like for instance, I'll give you an example. Bernadette Devlin, during the Battle of Bogside was a famous leader at that time, and she was one of the first Irish Republicans elected to. She's basically an MP elected on an independent Irish Republican ticket. And when she came to New York City, she was given the key to the city by I think like an Irish American group or something like that. And she took the key and she handed it off to the Black Panther Party at that time, because she had seen a lot of solidarity with the Black Panther Party at that time. And like Irish Republicanism would like for instance, there was a big George Floyd mural. I can't believe that this past year, a big George Floyd mural there on the International Wall on the Falls Road. You know what I mean? So there is like Well, I would say, yeah, the racism happens everywhere. It will happen. You see happen racism. There's definitely a vicious edge to it on the loyalist side. And I'm just being completely honest, as someone who's moved here 3 years ago, like over there, it's really disgusting. Refugees or immigrants, when they move into those areas over there, they're either going to have to pay protection money to the loyalist paramilitaries, or they're going to get like it is like some heavy duty crap. And I obviously grew up in South Carolina. This is like, they'll get the locals only spray painted over their windows. They'll get their windows broken in. They'll get petrol bombs thrown through the windows, and they'll what they're essentially called burned out of their houses for not being white and moving into a loyalist area. I mean, this is a despicable, disgusting level of racism. And there's a lot of anti-racist activism going on here. But of course, it's a very violent edge. I mean, these are loyalist paramilitaries. These are guys, that are gangsters. Really, these run the show. And you get on the bad list of these people, and they really come for you. Like they will kill you. And so I think a lot of people have a lot of people are very intimidated. You know what I mean? I think it's sad and disgusting when you see this happen. A lot of times you will see neighbors come out and try to support them and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's always going to be an intimidation game, and people are intimidated. And I'm not trying to justify anyone's silence, because I think it's disgusting. But I'm just giving you a background that some people, I think, maybe they see this going on and then they're afraid to speak out because they don't want their house burned out, or and this kind of stuff. And so yeah, there's racism going on here that really needs to be talked about more. And that, to me, I think the racism issue today in Belfast is worse than the sectarian issue. To be quite honest, I think it's just because people who don't have to suffer or experience that racism aren't given the right, aren't given the level of platform that they need. And for instance, there was massive Black Lives Matter protests here in Belfast over the summer. And we obviously had very much tighter COVID restrictions than what you would have had in the southern United States. And the police hit every one of those Black Lives Matter people with, like, I think a 250-pound fine. But then the next week you had loyalists out there with Confederate flags and stuff like that, basically defending their statues, because that Protestant guy I was telling you about from the 12th of July, he was a slave owner. So they were like protecting the statues and stuff like that. They were breaking COVID violations and everything like that. But the police, they're not going to go and give them COVID fines at all, because they're afraid of, loyalist paramilitaries causing violence or whatever. And we've seen this time and time again. The women's rights marchers getting penalized, or the Palestinian solidarity protesters getting faced with fines. But meanwhile, you've got loyalist protests and marches and stuff going completely unpunished. So
I'd really like to get, as somebody who also moved from the southern United States, like I did, to this side of the world, I would just like to make sure that everybody understands that there's this kind of idea for Americans, especially when they think of Europe, they think of it as some kind of less racist or something like that. I have always said it is just as racist. It's just a different language or a different accent. And it's the way that it's perpetrated seems to be subdued almost. It's like there's still a veil over your eyes somehow. And in America, it's still difficult to see for a lot of people, but it's easier to see in America than it is to see in Europe a lot of times. But saying that, what have you found that it's Americans have this idea that it's somehow it's not racist over here, and then I'm not calling out these guys as dumb or anything like that, but when I told them, oh yeah, there's vibrant Black Irish TikTok, they're like, wait, there's Black people in Ireland, because they just don't have these ideas. So how have you experienced that? Is it actually like that?
Yeah, no, I would say, well, that's a great point as well. I think that's one of the big misconceptions people have. Ireland is a multicultural place, especially in the cities. But also at the same time, people who are born and raised here, regardless of the color of their skin, these people are Irish. These are Irish people, and being Irish doesn't mean you're white. Irish means you're from Ireland, really, right? And I mean, so, but I'm actually in a feminist book club with a woman who's born and raised in Belfast, and she's come from a mixed interracial parent, and she's moved to Liverpool because she just was fed up with some of the racial abuse and stuff she got growing up. Like I said, I think when it comes to the Irish Republicanism, and I spend a lot of time in Irish Republican areas, and all the Irish Republican parties are along the left-wing spectrum. Like all of our political parties would be very much in support and solidarity with, all forms of anti-racism, and always have been. That's why Nelson Mandela was such a big, was so involved in the North of Ireland as well, because there was a lot of solidarity between that and here. But what I'm saying is, like, do I find racism is higher than where I grew up in South Carolina? In some ways, yes. Yeah, definitely. I definitely do. And I think what's really shocking to me is people's just complete lack of awareness, because they've isolated people from that aren't white. Maybe they're not in their social networks, and they don't talk to people, and so they don't understand or appreciate that there actually is really racism here, because they never experience it. They never see it. None of their friends experience or see it. So they actually come away with this weird concept of like, oh, well, no, that's America thing. Like why are we dealing with Black Lives Matter here? That's an American problem. That's an American issue. Why do we have Black Lives Matter protesters here? And they're completely oblivious to the blatant high levels of racism all around them. That can be a problem, but I don't want to sit here and make it sound like everybody in Belfast is racist. I don't think that's by far not the case. And like I said, I do want to emphasize there are a lot of anti-racist activism here, but racism is a massive problem here.
Oh,
yeah, I knew England was racist. I've seen the movie This Is England, so yeah, I knew. They're pretty racist over there.
I'm actually quite lucky that where I live, we have a very multicultural neighborhood, and they don't seem to mind that my husband and I are kind of the hillbillies on the street. But I don't think anybody knows that I'm indigenous, like Native American. So they think I'm a white lady. But where I live is quite multicultural, like in this area of town. But I've seen more just flagrant vocal racist abuse in this country than I ever did in Florida somehow. And that makes it seem like I was really, coddled in Florida. I wasn't. It's that America has had to have some kind of reckoning, and that the flagrant abuse can only happen in very specific circumstances. Whereas over here, there hasn't quite been that reckoning in a lot of European countries. And they don't even think that this vocal abuse, this abuse that you see just casually in places, is racism. For them, it's still normal. There's no check in the brain that's like, oh, this is racism. What I'm doing is wrong. Therefore, I'm making the choice to do this. It's just common. It's just all the time. And that's what I found when I moved over here. And when I moved over here, I was very young, and I was kind of fleeing the United States. And I thought, at that point, I'm going to have a great time over here. I'm finally going to feel a lot better about where I live. And then I realized that no, it's just that as a people, as countries, they haven't realized it yet. Whereas in America, I feel like there's been such a groundswell of civil rights movements that America is still doing flagrantly racist things, but they've had to give lip service to laws and to some protections. So their racism has to be veiled behind something else. There has to be, it's not racist cops, it's cops following racist laws. So it's that kind of thing. Whereas it's over here, it's just so exposed, I think.
I think that's really well put. Yeah,
So
I think that's on the button.
Tommy, you gonna say something? Or just unmute?
Oh yeah. I was watching this documentary recently. I was hoping if you could tell me how accurate it is, but it's about this Irish immigrant who moves to LA, and he gets imprisoned by Ice-T, and then he gets set free. Called Leprechaun in the Hood.
I don't know.
Is that the one where is that the one where he like hits the weed and he's like, that is some killer shit?
That's the highest stages of Irish folklore there.
So now I'm glad you explained the racism part, because now I know where all the descendants, the Irish Americans, where the descendants came from. They're loyalists in Northern Ireland, because everyone knows that the Irish Americans in Boston are hella racist. My theory is that for some, like when they left and they got to where like around the Titanic sank, they started like just becoming Klansmen and they just settled in Boston. This has been a great conversation. We unfortunately got to come to an end because we've been going up for about an hour and 15 now, and that's usually like the attention span of our listeners. I've been told that we shouldn't go over like an hour 30. But what else? Like just wrapping up your final thoughts on what you would like people to know about the party, socialism in Ireland. Any final thought that you want to address or you want to talk about?
Well, yeah, and I think the final thought that I would just say, of course, is someone who grew up in South Carolina and now lives here. My dad, my family, obviously had come from Ireland very recently. That's how I got dual citizenship, et cetera. So I had always had an Irish background, but I grew up in South Carolina. And when I was growing up in South Carolina, you know, I obviously it's a very right-wing place, and sometimes I think back to that part of my childhood. I wish I could maybe bring some things that I've learned here about socialist organizing back to South Carolina. And I would say maybe some of those things really are just making sure that you are being some sort of material benefit to those people around you. Like we have our Solidarity Aid program, which is kind of, you know, like a mutual aid support system, but we also have an advice center where people can call in and get free advice and stuff like that, and free support and stuff. We've also, you know, we take people's local issues. You know, we put out surveys in our local communities that people can fill in online, and that gives us an idea of the issues people are dealing with in local areas. You know, I don't know how much this is going on in South Carolina today, because of course I've been gone for quite some time, but I would maybe like to just encourage people who are on the left in the South, who are still back and back home, which is just maybe really start getting ingrained with local issues of people. And I think maybe that's the barrier that I would if I was still living there today, that I would want to try to tap into, is just really trying to just connect with people and real issues. Because when you're helping people, yeah, they might hear all the socialist jingoism of like the propaganda on the news, but like when you're actually sitting there and you're actually making a real deal impact in people's lives and you're really tackling the problems that they care about, I think maybe that's really the one path that you can actually maybe start changing people's attitudes towards the left and towards anti-capitalism and socialism and stuff like that, and showing people that, like, you know, genuine solidarity, you know, and maybe less bickering online and, you know, all this stuff, you know, just by being actually out there in the real community. I mean, when it comes to Ireland, I would say too, the continued fight against sectarianism and capitalism here in Ireland continues. We are active 24/7. We are on the grind. We are building up our party. Our party is growing. The Workers' Party of Ireland is the one party in Ireland that offers that socialist alternative. I say that as an individual who joined. But yeah, solidarity to everybody back in South Carolina, you know, and the whole South as well. And the United States as well, you know, solidarity to everybody. So that's my closing thought.
All right, I got one more quick question.
Yeah.
South Carolina is like a fucking major hub for some of the best Southern food you can get. How much do you miss that?
more than you can imagine. I mean,
like you got the barbecue, the fucking Geechee cuisine, man. Like South Carolina's like the shit.
Oh yeah, no, I actually I'm a hobbyist myself, so I slow smoke stuff here, and that's one of the things that maybe I can try to make on my own. But I do miss being able to roll up to a restaurant and order up some pulled pork and stuff. But I miss like the boiled peanut stands on the side of the road. I miss, you know, things like Zaxby's, the Waffle House. Oh, I would just love to go.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
I would love to go into a Waffle House or something like that.
Like, you and I need to get together sometime and just lament the food that we've lost.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so fucking sick of British food.
Yeah, and I mean, I even things like Taco Bell. Like, there's not Taco Bell in Belfast, so
we only just got ours. Like last winter, we got ours.
That's it. Yeah, and we got tickets to Glasgow in a couple of weeks just so I can go over there and get the Taco Bell, because there's a Taco Bell in Glasgow. So I'm like,
we drove to Sheffield one time. We drove 2 hours away to Sheffield to go to Taco Bell because they opened one there.
I just got to drive right down the road.
Fuck you, Nelson.
All right,
y'all don't get health care.
Yeah, damn it. All right, fuck, you're right. Okay. So that's a fair trade. All right, y'all. At Dixieland, the proletariat, we believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons. Those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, and self-determination for all oppressed peoples. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to us on social media at Dixieland, the proletariat. We're coming to you from the birthplace of the civil rights movement, Montgomery, Alabama, as well as the United Kingdom. We'd also like to recognize we're recording on occupied land that rightfully belongs to the Muskogee Nation. Thank you, Craicelf, for coming on. I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners are going to learn a lot. I really appreciate it. Thanks for putting up with rescheduling and everything and staying up this late. Really appreciate it. Thank you, comrade.
anytime, guys.
Hell yeah. Tyler, do you think?
Well, good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll see y'all next time.
And down with the UVF.
To me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All you gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else seen the leprechaun? Say yeah!
I wanna know where to go. I wanna know where to go.
Give me the go.
I wanna know where to go.